In order to direct the course of discussion, there are a number of things that we note about geopolitical change that will affect the acceleration of Palestinian independence. Number one, that the normalization camp of UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco, Egypt, and Jordan, and we think that cannot help Israel. The second point is the Ukraine war is a strategy to weaken Syria indirectly and weaken Russia directly as the main figure of supporting Syria. The third point, rapprochement of Iran and Saudi Arabia through China strengthen Iran's position at the same time strengthening the resistance from front of Hamas, Hezbollah, and resistance in the West Bank. And fourth point is the reconciliation of Saudi Arabia and Yemen through mediation of Oman. We hope that strengthen Yemen as the front of resistance against Israel. And fifth point, Israel internal rift between Netanyahu with in coalition with the hard faction against the riot, the dismissal of the minister, resignation of several pilots, and other blundering activities. Another point is Saudi now plan to open an embassy in Damascus. And other point, Europe and France moving closer to China. China can now buy Saudi Arabia oil with yuan, and also US hegemony of Arab Saudi is rapidly fading. There are some notes that can be taken into consideration for the discussion. We ask to the speaker provide important point of the word geopolitical change that so fast and what impact this had on acceleration of Palestinian independence. The first presentation is Mr. Feroze Mithiborwala. Can you hear our voice, Mr. Feroze?
I can hear you clear.
We can see your video.
Yes.
Please. Okay, please, time is yours.
Okay, Faraz not speaking first from Ireland?
No, you.
Okay.
You
Okay. I thank you, Brother Maruf, and all our friends from Indonesia who have organized this international conference on Palestine. And Maruf and we and Rule out here, Sabir, are a group of Asian friends who have been working consistently, as many others here are on, for the cause of Palestine. I think we have a very interesting time for the cause of Palestine. We have never been more positive about the end result, the end game of Palestine. A few years ago, it looked like a very, very long distance away for the freedom of Palestine. But now I think we are 5 years away, and I'll tell you why. Both the kingdoms of Israel have lasted for no more than 80 years. We are now approaching the 75th year with the Nakba on the 14th of May. There have been two Israeli leaders, one of them being Ehud Barak and another major leader as well, who have said that we have not gone beyond 80 years. And one of them has said that we'll be lucky if we get to 100. So now let us look at the situation around in the region. The recent attacks by Netanyahu on the Al-Aqsa Masjid were obvious to what is happening within Israel. There has been an uprising against Netanyahu's plans to totally control the judiciary. And the uprising on the streets was not about Palestine. It is a battle between secular Jews and religious Jews, secular Zionists and religious Zionists. Both are one on the issue of Palestine. It was a matter of who controls the judiciary, who controls the country. So the uprising on the streets of Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, or where the protests were taking place had nothing to do with ending the occupation or in terms of human rights of Palestinians. It was about a vision of a Zionist apartheid Israel, differing in a few ways. So after that crisis, and we were aware that this is what Netanyahu does. Every time there is an internal crisis, he starts bombing Gaza or he created an external problem with Syria or with Lebanon. So this time what he did was basically he sent his security forces into the Al-Aqsa Masjid during Ramadan. During Ramzan, we have security forces going on to the Haram Sharif, targeting the Muslims within the Al-Aqsa Masjid, praying the silent peacefully. And that was meant to provoke. So we had missiles coming from Gaza, from Lebanon, and from Syria. Now note, all these missiles that came in were from the Palestinian resistance forces in Gaza, in Lebanon, and in Syria. This is very important. The other issue is that post the American withdrawal from Afghanistan and their subsequent withdrawals from Iraq, they're not yet totally out of Iraq, but definitely weakened. The world we knew was changing. The wars in the last 20 years have all now started to come out against America, weakening America for two reasons. Even its allies do not trust America. The dollar is certainly growing weaker. The reason being that the Americans had weaponized the dollar and sanctions on countries who held the dollar. So countries began to understand that we have to move away from the dollar. So now we are witnessing the de-dollarization of the international economy, and countries working on the basis of their own currencies. This is weakening America. The war in Ukraine has weakened America. They thought they could destroy Russia or grind Russia down into another Afghanistan or Vietnam. It is not happening. The Russians are winning. This war did not start 1 year ago. This war started way back in 2014, when Yanukovych, the democratically elected president, was overthrown by the Americans, mainly the neoconservatives, the Jewish Zionists like Victor and Nuland. So from a unipolar world, we're heading towards a multipolar world. And in the multipolar world, the global south, the east, is going stronger. Russia, China, Iran, even India for the matter, Saudi to Turkey to Egypt, they all want to become, and including Brazil, they all want to become part of the BRICS Plus. The BRICS is again playing an important role. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is playing a very important role. Indonesia is very, very key to the emerging axis of the global south, as was the case during the non-aligned movement post-independence, where India, Indonesia, Nkrumah of Africa, and Tito of Yugoslavia, Nasser of Egypt, Nehru of India, they all came together, and of course, the great Indonesian leader, they all came together and created the non-aligned movement. And now, again, the global south is arising, Sukarno of Indonesia. Yeah. So now that's a situation where the balance of power is now changing away from America towards the east. And in that context, we need to see what's happening in Palestine. Number one, the resistance in Gaza is way, way stronger for Israel to handle. Israel doesn't have the guts to take its tanks into Gaza. A 35 by 12 kilometer strip. We know the strength of Gaza now. Last time also, when there were attacks on the Al-Aqsa, the Hamas fired rockets to teach the Israelis a lesson. After 11 days, Netanyahu wanted the war to stop. They couldn't handle the situation. The second important factor is the rising resistance in the West Bank. This is very, very important, because now we have a new faction. It's not even a faction, it's a unity of the resistance inside the West Bank and East Jerusalem. It's called the Lion's Den. The Lion's Den is a unified resistance of all the resistance movements within the West Bank, from the Fatah, the Hamas, to the PFLP, to the leftists, to the secularists, to the Islamists. They are all coming together within the Lion's Den. It's youngsters, 25-year-old, 20-year-old boys who are now fighting the Israelis. And we know that the resistance was very strong in Jenin, in Nablus, and the resistance is going stronger in Jenin, Nablus, Hebron, all over the West Bank, and that is what the Israelis are worried about. So the Gaza pattern of resistance is now taking root in the West Bank. And that is why we are seeing more and more of Israeli attacks on the West Bank. The third problem, and it's a big problem, the entire issue of the settlers who have gone mad actually. The settlers are extremist Jewish Zionists, they're fanatics, they wield weapons, machine guns, and they kill Palestinians on a daily basis, roaming around the West Bank with guns and shooting Palestinians on sight, hitting them, destroying the fields, destroying the water. We've seen the settlers who are totally crazed Jewish fanatics. And now the answers are being found by the Lion's Den. That is why more and more of militant resistance to the West Bank is taking place. Let me clear this at the onset that every freedom movement has two paths. One is the non-violent path and the other is the path of the gun. Both are, Nelson Mandela also did not ever give up the path of armed resistance for the African National Congress, nor did India, where we had Mahatma Gandhi leading the non-violent movement and Bhagat Singh and Subhash Chandra Bose leading the armed resistance. And there is a special United Nations resolution which says that Palestinians and every anti-colonial movement has a right to armed resistance. So always remember that. Now the point comes of the weakening of Zionism. This is very, very important, sir. Friends, see, please remember that South Africa collapsed when its ideology of apartheid collapsed. The founding ideology of South Africa was apartheid. When the ideology of apartheid collapsed due to internal contradictions, due to a global movement of sanctions, due to a global movement of boycotting South Africa, that is the time that South Africa began to collapse internally. And one fine day we get up and see that white rule in South Africa is over. Similarly, in Israel, the crisis of Zionism is on. And let us understand what Zionism is and why it will collapse and is collapsing. Zionism is defined as the national movement. My request, Brother Maruf, you made me an admin. Please, I'm getting a lot of pop-ups asking them to letting me join. I think you don't make me a co-host, please. It's very difficult for me to handle both the points. So coming to the question of Zionism and why is it collapsing? You can see the battle ongoing in Israel internally right now, that they do not have one understanding, one vision of Zionism. There is one vision of the religious Zionists, which is an extreme form of Judaism, of Jewish extremism or fanaticism, which is religious. And on the other side, you have secular Zionist fanatics as well. Both are Zionists, both are fanatics. One is secular, the other is religious. They do not have one vision of Israel right now. And the internal contradictions are leading to the weakening of Israel from inside. In the last 6 years, we have had 5 elections. No government goes beyond 6 months. Netanyahu is facing corruption charges, as we all know, which is why he wants to control the judiciary. The settlers want to weaken the judiciary so they can expand the settlements, which is why the attacks on the judiciary, that the parliament should decide. Out of 120 seats, 64 are with the Netanyahu government, in which we have Ben Gvir and Smotrich, who have called for the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian population, who don't want Jews and Arabs, Palestinians to live side by side, who want different wards and hospitals for Jewish mothers and Palestinian mothers. It is a vision of utter madness, Zionism. Because Zionism is an ideology of supremacism, that the Jews are supreme, that Judaism is supreme, that they are the only true children, to the chosen people of God. Now, nobody is the children of God. All religions are equal in my, and all need to be given equal respect. We should all be accepting other ways of truths to salvation. This is a problem with the Abrahamic religions, but we will discuss that sometime later. But the problem of Jewish Zionism is acute. And there's an important book written by one Israeli writer. His name is A.B. Weisfield, The End of Zionism and the Liberation of the Jewish People. The End of Zionism and the Liberation of the Jewish People. A.B. Weisfield, please get that book. The other important book we should be reading is by Professor Shlomo Sand, The Invention of the Jewish Identity. Very, very important book. It totally all the lies of Zionism is exposed in that book. Professor Shlomo Sand, I'm sure some friends out here would be knowing of the book. Professor Shlomo Sand, the end of the invention of the myth of the Jewish identity. Now, coming to the internal situation in Israel, with the steady collapse of Zionism as an ideology, which is the founding ideology of Israel, the contradictions are rising, the divisions are growing. This time, the reservists within the Israeli army were on the streets against Netanyahu, that we will not serve. The defense minister, Yoav Gallant, he resigned. He's back in the government, but imagine the defense minister of the government resigning. So the contradictions are acute. And at the same time, what are we witnessing? Witnessing the two things. One is the resistance has grown stronger in Gaza, in Lebanon. We know how strong Hezbollah and the resistance are. In Syria, the government has held strong. The government of Bashar al-Assad, supported by all his cabinet ministers, the Syrian Arab army, the majority of the people of Syria have withstood an attack by America, France, Britain, even Turkey and Saudi involved, but now that is all ending. So Syria is held strong, Iraq is now stabilizing, and Iran is as strong as ever. But the other important thing is the talks between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The Shia-Sunni problem that Israel wanted to play on has now ended. Iran and Saudi are talking. Iran and Saudi are getting more and more friendlier, which has led to an immediate ceasefire in Yemen, which has been the longest genocide. In Yemen, we have a ceasefire and heading to the political solution. In Syria, the Arab League has now chosen to take Syria back. Qatar, UAE, Saudi, Turkey were all involved in this war on Syria. Now they've realized the folly, the mistakes. And now Syria is back as part of the political solution within the Arab world. So the contradictions within the Arab world are now lessening, within the Islamic countries are now lessening. A larger unity is being built up. And the so-called Abraham Accords have failed. UAE, Bahrain and Morocco and Sudan, those accords don't mean anything anymore. Because we saw with Qatar, the World Cup football matches in Qatar, that Palestine was the one who won the World Cup. He had Palestinian flags in every football match. And the Moroccan players, whose king has signed an agreement with the Abraham Accords with Israel, the people of Morocco, the people of the Arab world, be what the governments do, but we saw that the people of the Arab world are with the Palestinian struggle. So the Abraham Accords have failed. The Arabs are uniting. The Muslim Islamic world is again uniting. The Christians and Muslims of West Asia and North Africa are one. A very important announcement from the Christian churches of Palestine. An attack on the Al-Aqsa is an attack on the Christian community. An attack on the Al-Aqsa is an attack on the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And we have just passed the time of Easter and Good Friday. And we know that what importance the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, because it marks the spot of the ascension and the resurrection of the ascension of Jesus Christ. So the Christian world is uniting in West Asia. And in Europe and in America, the extreme Jewish government today in Tel Aviv is creating problems for Jews who cannot identify with this fanatical Nazi government right now in Tel Aviv. So in America, young Jews are moving away from Israel, are even moving away from Judaism, because once a religion is seen to identify violence and terrorism, as is the case right now with the Jewish state, that time the crisis comes and young Jews are now moving away from both Israel and from Judaism in America. So the crisis is now growing and the boycott movement is growing. The work that friends like us have been doing, the friends in Europe and America have been doing. The boycott divestment movement is going stronger. As our friend from Ireland, they do wonderful work in Ireland. So the isolation of Israel is growing. The balance of power in West Asia is changing. The balance of power globally is changing. G7 is not important anymore. NATO is seeing divisions, with France talking of taking independent position as so is Italy. A number of members of parliament across Europe are saying that this war against Ukraine is the wrong war. It will harm Europe, which it has, because you are getting cheap Russian oil and gas for all the European countries, and you're buying oil and gas from America 3 and 4 times the price. So this is harming the European economies. So that is why the division between America and Europe will grow. And Russia, China, Iran has played a very, very important role in the entire struggle. And India, Indonesia, Indian foreign policy different, Indian internal policies are anti-minority, which we'll maybe discuss at a later date. We have tremendous problems in India with this right-wing Hindutva government, all the way from Kashmir to all across the country. But that's a different story. At least on this point, the government has chosen to go the Nehruvian way to stand with the third world. It's good that this government has not stood with America and has chosen to stand with the global south. So you have now the Shanghai Cooperation Organization being the largest platform in the world for international forum. BRICS is now emerging as a BRICS Plus. So countries all the way from South America to Africa to Asia are all becoming part of BRICS Plus. So G7 and NATO are not important. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS is important. G20 is also a talk shop, nothing much gets done there. But independent international platforms, which do not include Europe and America, are now emerging, both for our political unity, for our economic trade, and all these will have repercussions on the situation in Palestine. I just end with this part. I remember I would be talking to my friends in Beirut and in Lebanon especially. We are very close to, we've learned a lot, and that was the international center, even friends in Cairo to Damascus. We would all be going there, including, of course, Tehran. The point is, when does Palestine get liberated? We knew it will eventually, but when? It was very clear that the balance of power had to change. The balance of power was too much in favor of Israel, number one, with America and the Europeans standing by that. A war in Iraq had just taken place. The Middle East was totally divided among themselves. Some with the Americans, some clearly with Israel, and then anti-resistance as well. So the disunity of the Arab Islamic world was one big factor. Israel was way too powerful with NATO and America backing it. So that balance of power had to be restored. Now the balance of power is coming back. In the meantime, we saw in 2006, the Lebanese resistance led by Hezbollah and the leftists as well over there, the communists out there. They stopped the Israelis at the border. Israel lost the war of 2004. It was clear that Israel was no more a military power. Israel's military story ended in 2006. Now, what was important was for America and Europe to weaken, and that is also happening. And for the unity of the resistance axis in the region. All of this is happening right now. So I think the prophecy of Israel being no more after 80 years is once again a very strong possibility. That's why I'll end that, and then we take this discussion. Thank you.